welcome to our studio guests today and to fellow travelers out in cyberspace, thanks to that non-stop stream of zeros and ones. My name is Peter Gobetz, co-founder of the Zero Project and moderator of the International Conference/Workshop on Zero. The Zero Project is a three-stage affair. There's a book project, an associated online event, and the in-depth research program to follow. But today, session number 7, and we welcome 2 other contributors to the monograph on Zero book project, Professor Beatrice Lumpkin in Chicago, USA, on Zero in ancient Egyptian mathematics, and Professor Anupam Jain in Indore, India, on early zeros in the ancient Jaina tradition. Both speakers will help us to zero in on the epicenter of the numeral 0 from their diverse perspectives. We also welcome back as panelists today from the previous sessions, number 6, Professor Alexis Lavie and Professor Joseph Bielo in Davis, California. B, if we may now kindly invite you to briefly introduce yourself and to present the thrust of your paper, please.
Good morning, all, and good afternoon, depending on where you are. I am a mathematics teacher who became interested in Egyptian mathematics at the urgent request of my students at Malcolm X College. And my subject today is, yes, Egyptians did have a zero. The history of zero is part of the history of humanity. That history has been rewritten by colonialism and imperialism to justify their invasion and enslavement of other countries. The resulting Eurocentric, racist version of mathematics history claims mathematics began in Europe and hides much earlier contributions by people of color. I thank the Zero Project for giving us the chance to set the record straight. I'll be discussing the ancient Egyptian concept of zero. For many, zero is mainly a placeholder for numerals. That's important, but far from the whole story. I will show evidence that the Egyptians used zero as a number of value and also as a reference point between positive and negative numbers, but not as a placeholder. Where did the zero placeholder come from? That happened independently in Asia and the Americas. Naturally, a zero placeholder makes sense only for systems of numerals that have place value. To help understand the place of zero in mathematics, let's consider the principles behind our modern numerals that were developed in India 1,500 years ago. Slide, please. Cipherization. All that means is you write a single cipher, one symbol instead of tally marks. For example, we write 6 instead of 6 tally marks. Now that was a big thing. Can you imagine trying to write and count 1,000,000 or even 1,000 tallies? Ancient Egyptians found a better way 5,100 years ago. On Narmer's mace head, they wrote 1,000,000 using the hieroglyph for the god He. That was one cipher, just one symbol for 1,000,000. Place value numerals. The earliest we know of were in Mesopotamia or Iraq, about 5,500 years ago, but no zero placeholder yet. The zero placeholder, Indians developed a decimal place value system and used the zero placeholder to mark an empty position. They also developed ciphers, the symbols for 1 to 9. And with place value, those were the only symbols they needed. Place value numerals were developed also by people on different continents. Slide 2, please. You're looking at a kipu, that's the string chords being displayed from Peru, where the Inca, Aymara, and other peoples used quipus such as you see in this slide. Quipus were knotted strings with the knots arranged in a base 10 place value system. A zero value was represented by the absence of knots at the given string level. And in Central America, as you see on the other part of the slide, the Maya had invented a vertical positional system of numerals based on 20. The shell symbol you see held an empty place. That was their zero placeholder. Now, Egyptian numerals, if we could have the next slide, were different. They were additive. No place value was needed. On the slide, the Egyptian hieroglyphs to represent 19,607 took 23 different symbols, and you just read them all off. But for everyday writing and for the mathematical work that they did, it was the center of the slide, the Egyptian hieratic that we use. As you see, only 4 symbols represented 19,607. Well, how did they get away from using a zero? If you look at the right of the 4 symbols, the first one is 10,000. The next one, 9,000. The next, 600. And the last on the left, 7. So 19,607 with just 4 symbols. On the right, for comparison, there is the Babylonian cuneiform, which did have place value. And at that time, about 3,900 years ago, still no zero placeholder. Now, back to Egypt and zero. Next slide. You're looking at a 3,700-year-old bookkeeping record from Papyrus Bullock 18, where zero is used as a number. I'm not sure if you can read all of this, if it's large enough, but the slide shows day 29 income and expenditures of food and beverages for the Pharaoh's traveling court. Line 8, horizontal there, sums up the total that came in, and near the bottom, line 14, all that was used that day. And the very bottom, which is the most interesting part, is the balance that could be carried over to the next day. Look at the third column. After there's row numbers, the second, the daily bread, extra bread, and then the column that is regular beer. They sure drank a lot of beer. There are only 21 regular beers left over from 237. But what's that at the bottom in the last four columns? That is the Egyptian hieroglyph for nefer, which also means good, beautiful, complete. Well, what could that mean, and why was it not translated? Alexander Schaff, the first translator of this papyrus, perhaps that was way back in the 1920s. Perhaps he didn't want to challenge the books that claimed Egyptians had no zero. But if you take 52 sweets from 52 sweets, what you're left with is 0 sweets. And if you take the same number of special beers, 52, from the 52 that came in, you're left with 0s. A later translator, Ballinger, did translate these remainders as 0. Now, in the next slide, we'll see nefer, the Egyptian word, also used to label the 0 point on a vertical number line using directed numbers. The massive tombs and pyramids of Egypt required deep foundations, and this is a diagram of one that's still visible. The horizontal lines you see, Egyptologists believe they were used as leveling guidelines to make sure each course of the huge stones are completely level, so the massive pyramid did not collapse. Look at the horizontal line at the top. That's labeled Neferu for 0. And it has the same character that we saw in the bookkeeping record. Other labels can still be read. Go down to the next label, 5 cubits below 0. Those horizontal lines are spaced 1 cubit apart. At other locations, there are also such lines with the number of cubits above 0 and below 0, with Neferu as the reference or 0 point. Looking at the slanted line on the right of the screen is the line that indicates the slope of the tomb, the massive tomb or pyramid. The measure the Egyptians used, they called seked. We don't know the sounds of the vowels. In this case, if you count the number of spaces, the slope or the slant, the seked was fixed at 1 to 4. Next slide, please. Construction sites often reveal the mathematical knowledge of the builders. This architect's diagram provides an example of the Egyptian use of rectangular coordinates. It was found at the Saqqara Step Pyramid, built 4,700 years ago. The curve you see matches a section of a nearby temple roof. Notice the curve turns sharply downward toward the baseline, where the vertical coordinate would be 0. Unfortunately, that part of the diagram was broken off, so we don't know if they actually labeled it as 0. The standard spacing between the vertical lines was 1 cubit, and that gives horizontal coordinates for the points on the curve as 0 for over on the left, 1, 2, 3, 4 cubits, and so forth. Now, the cubit was the length of a forearm, and that's at the top of each coordinate that's labeled vertically. So it's easy to read. Starting at the highest point of the curve, you see the cubit symbol, 3 cubits, the palm, 3 palms, and 2 fingers. Converted to fingers, the coordinate for the leftmost point, the coordinates are 0 and 98. In conclusion, the examples cited above illustrate the multinational, multicultural, multiracial development of mathematics. These facts of history refute the racial claims of European intellectual superiority. Although based on lies, racist versions of history have adversely affected the study of mathematics. When we have the full picture, it will include the truth that all people have developed the mathematics that their cultures need. That full story will make mathematics more interesting and accessible for all. Thank you.
Thank you, Bea. Thank you very much. Very impassionate presentation and very educational. Professor Jain, may I now request you just to briefly introduce yourself and to enlighten us about zero in the Jain tradition, please.
Myself, Dr. Anupam Jain, Professor of Mathematics at Center of Ancient Indian Mathematics, and presently I am the Director of Center for Ancient Indian Mathematics at Devi Ahilya University, Indore. My major field is Jain School of Mathematics. I am studying Jain School of Mathematics since 1980, means from 4 decades. Now the present project is the zero, origin of zero. And during my study, I have found that the first use of zero is available in written form in the Mahabandh of Bhutbali, whose period is 1st century AD. The Mahabandh is a Jain text written by Bhutbali, and in this we find the zero, but here zero is not in the sense of place value. Here zero represents the absence, void, not in the mathematical sense. The first use of zero in mathematical sense is found in the Tiloy Parnati of Yati Vrishab. This is the text of 2nd century AD and originally compiled in 176 AD. The oldest copy of this text is available in the Shravana Bel Gola in Kannada script in the Karnataka state of India. Here we find several verses in which there is use of zero. I am quoting a verse of 4th chapter. Sunnanam Gayana Daga Ikkakhatia Sunna Nava Naha Sunna Chakheda Joyana Chia Anka Kame Manua Loya Khitta Phalam. This is the verse of 4th chapter of Tiloy Parnati, and in this chapter the word sunna used for the zero. This is the verse number 8 of chapter 4, and it is on the page 3 of 2nd volume of Tiloy Parnati. I will send you, I have already quoted it in my paper, and especially this very verse I can send you. Now, the meaning of this verse is 0005 210 3090 06 and 1. Yojan is the numerical value of the area of human world. Mathematically, it is 1600 90 301 25 000 yojan. As you know, yojan is the length unit in Jain tradition, and he is saying that the numerical value of the area of human world is this. So this is completely mathematical dimensional detail in which we find several use of zero with place value. This is one reference. As you know that in the universal theory of number, Georges Ifra quoted that in 458 AD, a text written named Loya Vibhag, written by Sarvanandi, there is evidence of use, clear evidence of the use of zero. So in the 5th century, in the Loy Vibhag, we find the reference of 0 in several places, and the details of all such references of Lok Vibhag by Sarvanandi is given in my paper. This is composed in 458 AD originally, and now the available version, it's the Sanskrit translation of this Prakrit text, which is written by Singh Suri in of 11th century. But the original text was written in 458 AD, and this is confirmed by the internal evidence of Lok Vibhag written by Acharya Sarvanandi, and all details was quoted by George Ifra in their text Universal Theory of Number. This is very big text on history of number, and we find the complete references of it. I have also given it in my paper. The third reference of the use of 0 was found in Aniyom Dwara Sutra of Arya Rakshit. This is another very important text of Jain tradition in which we find the use of 0 in Aniyom Dwara. In Aniyom Dwara, the details of human world, the total population of human race is given, and this is a number of 29 digits. He says 2 raised to the power 96. Of course, there is a Prakrit verse, Gautam Duviha Pannatta Tam Jaha Baddadheliya Ya Maulakayatha Tatha Nimje. In this way it is written, and in explaining the human being population, they write the number with 29 places. This number is 2 raised to the power 64 into 2 raised to the power 32 is equal to 2 raised to the power 96. And when we calculate the 2 raised to the power 96, we find 79228, 162, 514, 264, 337, 593, 543, 95, and then 0, 336. So in this number of 29 digits, from right hand to left hand on 4th place, means at the place of 1000 we find the use of 0. So whenever they evaluate the number value of 2 raised to the power 96 and find a number of 29 digits, and here we use the 0, so this is a clear cut evidence of the use of 0. So Aniyom Dwara Sutra, Tiloy Parnati, and the Lok Vibhag are the 3 references. Out of these 3, Lok Vibhag is composed in 5th century, and Vakshali Hastalipi is of 3rd to 4th century. As by carbon dating process, the portion containing the 0 has been evaluated. But Aniyom Dwara Sutra and the Tiloy Parnati both are the text of 1st, 2nd century AD. Finally, we can say that the knowledge of the use of number 0 in the mathematical sense with place value system exists in the Jain tradition in 1st, 2nd century. Of course, some people assume that as per details of the Pariyamma Suttam and the references which is available in the later Jain text, they suppose that Pariyam Suttam, the author of Pariyam Suttam may know the use of 0, but there is no clear evidence. So formally we can say that in Aniyom Dwara Sutra and in the Tiloy Parnati we find clear use of 0. These 0, not only in theory, but in mathematical sense, in the form of the hollow circle, it is used in the Tiloy Parnati. It is available in the published edition too, and the copy of the 12th century is laying in the Jain Mutt of Shravan Belgola district, Hassan of Karnataka state. This is in South India. So I think that these are the evidences which shows that in 1st, 2nd century there are use of 0 in Jain tradition. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much. It's very insightful to hear from a specialist in the field. on occasion it's mentioned in books here and there, but for somebody like yourself who's delved into this, we will revisit this because it's very important, and we need, of course, to document this to be able to be convincing. So we will revert to that. But for now, and keeping in the format of this program, I would ask B whether you have any questions for Professor Jain, and then I will ask Professor Jain if he has any questions for B, and then we'll take it from there with the panelists.
Welcome.
B, any questions for Professor Jain?
Yes. And I found that most interesting. Thank you. My question is, with the numbers as huge, as large as you mentioned, how do you suppose mathematicians so long ago had any need for such large numbers?
Professor Jain?
Yeah.
Could those huge numbers that you mentioned, what was the practical use that mathematicians required such large numbers? Could you explain that briefly?
This is Teloe is a cosmographical text, and they are giving the details of the cosmography. Means what is the length of the different areas and what are the population in particular area. There may be the purpose of giving such number is quite clear, that they want to mention what is the population. What is the population? So, of course, there may be some differences that this population was actually laying or not, but we are only intended because the details which is available in the Teloe text are more fantastic, but we are intended to search the style of writing zero and the use of zero in mathematical sense. Therefore, I have quoted these things.
True. Quite right.
On other places, they derived the time units, and the largest time unit which is given or which is mentioned in the Teloe is Achalatma, and the value is 84 raised to the power 31 into 10 raised to the power 190. 84 raised to the power 31 into 10 raised to the power 190. This is a very big number. Very, very big number. But our interest is they know the use of zero, and multiplying 84 lakhs, yani 84, and then 50, and then raised to the power 31, and they have evaluated this value. It means they know the operations on zero and placing them at proper place.
Right, thank you. B, from my side, Professor Jain already indicated, but let me rephrase it in a different way. Their mathematics derived from their cosmology, as he was saying. They were concerned about the universe. They were reflecting on this, on life and our place in the universe, and their conception of the universe was huge. It was tremendous. You know, in fact, they knew the concept of infinity as far as that's concerned. So, in the context of their cosmology, they developed their advanced mathematics to be able to match their theorizing about the universe, and that's, you know, kind of a stroke of luck that their philosophy, their religion, impelled them to use mathematics as a tool to be able to supplement their religious beliefs. It's a very interesting aspect of the Jain tradition that led them to play with large numbers, and then, of course, to find concise ways to express that, which at some point, of course, will require zero. So there seems to be a lot of evidence for that. And again, we're not here to speculate. we're here to gather the evidence and then to have a research program put in place to be able to actually verify this scientifically so that it becomes credible to the outside world. So that's the longer range purpose. Same with Egypt, same with the Jain tradition, same with other traditions that we'll be discussing. We will review the evidence that we already have, but then we want to go beyond that. We want to have people now go in with a particular agenda and then search to see whether any fresh evidence can be produced. And that has not been done so far. There's never been any systematic, concerted effort to do that. There's been, serendipity finds that are documented and reported, but nobody then goes out and connects all the dots and tries to go to further back and to see whether there's any evidence left to be found. Professor Jain, do you have any questions for Professor Lumpkin about Egyptians?
No, it is. My point is very clear that in the details of the cosmography, which we can't verify their details, but for the description purpose, for illustration purpose of cosmos, they have played well with the numbers and they have used the very big number in which there is the use of 0, 2. They have classified the number in countable, uncountable, and infinite. But in the process of explaining countable number, they have derived 2 units, time units. One is Achalatma and another is the Shirsh Prahedika. Achalatma is 84 raised to the power 31 into 10 raised to power 190, while Achalatma is 84 raised to the power 28 into 10 raised to power 120. So these 2 time units systematically developed from very, very small time unit known as Samay, and from Samay they have started up to year and then yug and then proceed again and again, and they have developed this very big number. One thing. Another, in giving the population of the man, human, and giving the population and giving the area of the land, they have used the 0 with the other numbers. So the clear use of the number 0 with mathematical purposes, with mathematical insight found in these 2 texts. And I have found that in other Indian texts, we find the use of 0, but they have never used as a hollow circle. Hollow circle are the symbol of the 0. And this 0 is available in the manuscript of the 12th century, which is preserved in the South India.
Professor
Literary
Jain,
use in so many places.
Professor Jain,
Yeah.
thank you very much. I think the point is clear.
Is there time for a comment?
Yes, please.
I am inspired to hear about not only the practical applications of this ancient mathematics, but also the theoretical probings. And for example, in ancient Egypt, there's only a scrap of this papyrus left, but it says on it, take 1/2 of a half of a half. Now we all know that the series of half, the power series of a half of a half of a half, that the limit will be 0. Unfortunately, the papyrus breaks off at that point. So, but we know they were in the process. And there's no practical application for that. So the wonderful thing about mathematics is that it not only answers the practical needs of the day, but anticipates the future needs of humanity by this type of theoretical work. So thank you, Dr. Jain, for those examples.
Well put, both of you. We will now go, we're trying to keep this within an hour and we don't have much time left. So we would like to go now to Alexis Lavie, who was there last week and who spoke very well about the likely influence of Buddhism on the invention of zero. Alexis, do you have any questions for Professor Lumpkin or Professor Jain, sir?
Yeah, I would start with my lady. It was Beatrice. Very, very nice introduction to this. Yes, it's very, very difficult to determine this invention in Egyptia and even in the Sumerian field, because the way of symbolizing and it's not a decimal way of counting, so it's very difficult to find. But my question was because I was not sure to fully understand. Is there a numerical symbol in Egyptia for the zero or not? A real proper one? Is there a symbol, a numerical symbol proper to manifest to sign zero, something like that, in Egypt?
B, could you answer that question?
It is not immediately.
Alexis asked whether there is a proper symbol for zero in Egyptian mathematics.
It's the same as it's a Nefer symbol, which we think represents the heart and the lungs and the windpipe. I'm sorry, I should have had a clearer picture of it, but that's the NFR, and we do not know the vowels, so we just put an E in between.
Alexis, you must have seen that symbol before, probably. It's not something we recognize as a dot or a zero or a hollow circle. It's rather a pictograph.
Yeah.
That's not what you meant.
Right.
And it was used only for zero, or it meant something else?
Oh, it meant many other things.
And could you tell me what?
Some Egyptologists call it a participle. No, a particle.
We're getting some disturbance. We're getting some disturbance.
Meaning a particle can only be used with other grammatical forms. So therefore, Nefer is used in other applications as well.
Alexis, I can tell you that casting ahead, we have Professor Friedhelm Hoffmann, who will come in later and look at it from his perspective. It's not uncontroversial. There's some controversy about the interpretation of that. But in answer to your question, that is, what Beatrice addressed. Do you have any other questions for Professor Jain, for example?
Yeah, but he's not here anymore.
I think there was some disturbance on his end, and he probably
maybe I can ask another question to dear Beatrice.
Yes, please.
Just a question about the transmission. You know, we know a lot. We know what we can know about the Egyptian mathematics because of the Greeks. And do you know something about the transmission, about that use of this Proto-Egyptian zero use in Greece? Because it's not very obvious. It seems that this very particular use of zero wasn't really transmitted as such in Greece.
Beatrice?
I'm glad you asked the question because it's a very contentious one about which many books have been written. And that's the fact that Greek mathematics was founded on the Egyptian mathematics, and of course continued it in a more abstract form. But there was a direct connection. And Alexandria, by the way, is not in Greece. It's in Egypt. And it was a blend that they call the Hellenistic culture. Part of the whole imperialist wiping out the history of people of color has been downplaying the Egyptian contribution.
Right. Alexis, your point is well taken. It's one that we will address also, because that Hellenistic zero is also contentious. There are some who claim that it was understood as a number zero, not just a placeholder. And we have not been able to find a specialist in that particular area yet who's willing or able to join us. We've spoken to several, but they were not available. But the claim is there, and it's a point also that Friedhelm Hoffmann will address, because he traces the Ptolemean symbol for zero in his astronomical tables to a prior Egyptian hieroglyph. So it's a very interesting point. Also about transmission. You know, was there transmission from the west to the east? Did India get it from Greece? Did Greece get it from India? There was trade between the two that we know. There's
Persia in between.
Sorry?
And Persia in between.
Well,
Persia.
actually, they traded by the sea route from South India to Middle Egypt. So they bypassed the land route. There may have, undoubtedly would have been overland traffic as well. But there was a play found in Middle Egypt called, let me think, forget the name, but it's a play that documents the presence of Indian traders who were resident in Middle Egypt. So there was contact there, and there may well be evidence, because there was a dump, a tip was found there with a lot of papyri that are being studied, and there may be evidence of transmission one way or the other. But that's a very important point in trying to get a better picture of the invention of zero. How exactly was it totally a local phenomenon, or was there transmission? Professor Jain is back. Alexa, do you have a question for Professor Jain?
Yes, thanks, Dr. Anupam. Just a question about what kind of mathematics was in that Sultan you mentioned from the 1st century. What kind of mathematics? It was an astronomical one, or just more a daily life one?
In the text Tilapannati, we find the details of the mathematics in connection with the cosmology and cosmography. While in Anuyogdwar Sutra, we find the details, mathematical details, in the process of explaining the theory of the karma. That is a special feature of the Jain literature, theory of karma, because Anuyogdwar Sutra is a text related with the philosophy, and Tilopanati is a text related with the cosmology and the cosmography. So the nature of these two texts is quite different, but common thing is both are related with the Jain tradition.
Yeah,
let me jump in again. Time is very short, and we haven't had Joe yet. If I may, rudely. Joe, could you just briefly introduce yourself and then pose any questions that you may have for either of the speakers?
My name is Joseph Biello. I'm a professor of mathematics at the University of California at Davis, but my expertise is more in fluid dynamics and physics and partial differential equations. So I very much enjoyed learning from both of you today. It was really edifying. Professor Lumpkin, I had a question. You'll see that the work that I'm going to present in a week is really worked with Renee Sampson, and neither of us are experts on the history or the anthropology of zero, but our discussion was regarded our sort of modern conceptualization, how we use zero in our own conversations, in mathematical conversations nowadays. And so what struck me about this conversation, especially from Professor Lumpkin, was the symbol that was used in that tally. It really resonated with me. So I have two questions for Professor Lumpkin. The first question is, pardon me, my Egyptology is not very good, but we talk about Egypt, and that's a very big window of time. Which that tally sheet that you presented, what was the date that it was taken at? What is the date? What is the date?
1800 BCE.
1880 BCE. Okay, 1800 BCE. That's and then the Nefer. And I didn't get this completely, but you have that symbol at the bottom, which is the Nefer, which we understand, which clearly represents zero. I mean, this is unquestionable. If the mathematics is correct, and subtraction, I'm sure they had it down pretty well. My question then is, what you had alluded to other meanings of that symbol, and that's really what I find very interesting about this, because the conceptualization and the other meanings of this symbol would be interesting to the way that they conceptualize that notion in that era, because I think I think that'll relate to a little bit about what I'll talk about. What else did it mean, or what else do we know that it meant?
Well, actually, as a particle, it had meaning only in relation to other words that it was used with. But one of those meanings is completeness. So, in a sense, especially if you're dealing with an arithmetic operation, you could see why they would associate it with something good. It's interesting to me that the Maya symbol of a shell for zero also had a good connotation. And beyond that, not being an Egyptologist, I'm not really qualified to fill in. But I was actually put on this path of discovery on the Egyptian zero by Egyptologists who agreed that yes, the Egyptians did have a zero, and that still while it's now a reasonable subject to discuss, there's been a lot of heat, political heat involved in denying it. So it's we're on very bitterly contested grounds.
Well, from my perspective, Peter, I just want to
Yeah.
close the circle, if I may.
Please.
What's interesting to me is when I'll talk, you'll see how Renee and I conceptual what we kind of thought about zero in terms of how we use it in physics and how we use it in at least in dynamical systems, and it really, you'll see that zero comes in as balance and equilibrium, and the notion of equilibrium and balance in the mathematical sense of equilibrium and balance is where zero is used very frequently, and you know, it's ubiquitous in that. And I find it interesting that conceptually there is a sort of no quality to zero that, you know, it's being associated with you know, these very you know, virtuous qualities, as you're saying, in the Mayan or in the Egyptian tradition, which I think is, and from my perspective, is more interesting about than where zero came from, but how everybody conceptualized zero and how they interpreted zero in the different cultures, right? How they interpreted this notion of nothing, which is not, it's not necessarily zero, but and how that could be interpreted as balance or equilibrium or something beautiful. So that, for me, that's a very interesting take on this, at least as a neophyte to this discussion.
Thanks, Joe. Any questions for Professor Jain?
I don't. Sorry, I was so focused on this one balance question that I unfortunately, sorry, Professor Jain, don't have any questions for you. I apologize.
Well, maybe Professor Jain can answer the same question. Was there a connotation to the word sunnah in the Jain tradition, a connotation other than simply the mathematical one? Did it have a connotation of goodness, completeness, balance, that kind of a thing? Professor Jain?
Please repeat.
Joe commented that he noted that there seems to be a connotation to the concept of mathematical zero in terms of other cultural fields, linguistically and otherwise, that would indicate something, you know, something favorable, something, you know, completeness, perfection. Was that concept of sunnah, was it associated in Jain culture as something good or favorable?
No, in Jain tradition, the cosmological details are given with the help of the Sunnah. The cosmological details requires the use of the zero, therefore they have used zero in writing lakhs, crore, etc., big numbers. The zero used in Jain tradition for giving the human population, for giving the area of any particular shape and the volume. So there is completely mathematical sense.
No,
They
but
are
no,
not.
Professor Jain, was there any other connotation to that word sunnah, which comes from Sanskrit and goes back much further?
No,
Was
in the
was
wide sense, in
yeah,
the sense of wide, it is used in the first century.
void.
Wide, VOID, wide.
Yeah, and void is
Void.
considered to be something.
Empty. For the empty space, it is also used. But in the first century, it is used for the empty space. From 2nd century onward, or in the 1st century BC, it is used for the emptiness. But from 1st century AD and onwards, it is used in the mathematical sense.
Right. Okay. Thank you, gentlemen. It's clear. We'll revert to this again in the context of different speakers as we come along, Joe, so you'll see. But we'd like to now conclude this and all sessions with a very brief survey for the two speakers only. Oh, actually, and the new panelist, the one new panelist, Joe. Please answer in a single sentence the following three questions, if you would, very quickly. We have a little time left. We're already over the 1 hour. Beatrice, was the numeral 0 discovered or invented? One sentence. Beatrice?
I would lean towards invented.
Good. That's good. That's good. That's what we want to hear. Professor Jain, was the numeral 0, was it discovered or invented?
It is invented.
Okay.
It is
Second,
invented.
Joe, was the numeral 0, was it discovered or invented?
The best my understanding with this, I would say it's invented also.
Okay. Question number 2. This transition, we've all agreed that the placeholder was very early, and that at some point the numeral emerges in history. The question is, this transition from the placeholder 0 to the numeral 0, was it a gradual evolutionary process, or was it really a disruptive moment in history? Beatrice?
Well, the premise is one I can't agree with, because I think 0 as a number was used before it was used as a placeholder.
Okay, very interesting. Good. Professor Jain, was it a transition from the placeholder to the numeral, and was it a gradual evolutionary process, or was it really a disruptive moment?
Gradual revolutionary process.
Okay.
Gradual revolutionary process, because initially they have used a small number, and gradually, according to their need, they have developed the more numbers. Therefore, I can say that is gradually developed.
Right, gradually developed. Joe, was it a gradual evolutionary process or a disruptive moment?
I don't feel completely qualified, but I actually don't think. I think we, as a society, put too much weight on these disruptive moments, and I think, well, if we look deeply into the history of most anything, everything is gradual evolutionary. Pretty much everything we've learned. It's just us looking back makes it seem that it's disruptive because we have coarse graining of our history.
Okay, good enough.
So
okay, and finally, the final question that we want to probe down the line, we'll revert to it, is Beatrice, is the concept of nothingness or emptiness, is it trivial or profound?
Well, since it's beyond me, I'll say it's profound.
Okay. Professor Jain, the concept of the void, is it trivial or profound?
Trivial.
Trivial. Okay.
Trivial, because it is used so many places. Whenever they feels, they write that it is empty, it is empty, it is empty.
Okay. Joe, nothingness, emptiness, trivial or profound?
painfully profound.
Okay. Great. All right. So I would like to, Alexis did this drill last week, so I won't trouble him. And I assume that you hasn't changed your mind. So Alexis, thank you all.
Ask again the questions.
No, you had your chance last week. Okay, listen, really appreciate you taking time on your Sunday morning, afternoon, or evening, whatever it happens to be. Really, you've enriched certainly the Zero Project and hopefully the world of our viewers as well, who now have a unique opportunity to take note of this information that took most of us half a lifetime to accumulate. So thank you very much, and tune in then the week after next to explore related issues, to see if we can pinpoint, if possible, the epicenter of Zero. Next week, Joe is already here now as a panelist. He's reversed the order, but Joe will be here next week to talk about the significance of Zero in modern mathematics and physics. So until next week, thank you again all for being here, And until next week, when Joe will also pay a special tribute to our late chairperson, who left us untimely a couple of years ago, and who was a good friend of myself and Joe. So Joe will also devote some words to that. Thank you very much. We're concluding now, and we'll see you in a little bit.